Got it.
Right. Hello, Mirna. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. So I'm joined right now by Mirna Jrej. She's the operation manager for Management Holdings. She's been doing this for more than 10 years now, and I'm really intrigued to know more from you about a few questions I'm going to ask you. It's going to be about teamwork, collaboration, and managing conflicts at the workplace. All right. Just to give you a little bit background about Mirna, she graduated from BU, Boston University, where she concentrated in marketing and operation and technology management. So she has a lot of experience in that domain, and uh, given her experience at Management Holdings, she's seen it all. So again, thank you, Mirna. I'm gonna start out with the first question. I want to ask you, given your experience, how important have teamwork and communication been to your success?
Yeah, I think teamwork and communication is very important because even if you're working with people who are under you or the same level as you or over you, you always want to be able to communicate with them because if they don't know what you need, they're not going to be able to help you. And if you don't know what they need as a person, you're also not going to be able to get them to work to their full potential. And communication just helps break down so many different barriers, even within teamwork, because if people can't communicate what they need, they're not even going to be able to work well together because there becomes animosity because they feel like what they asked for wasn't completed. But if you can't explain properly what you actually need and ask for it in the right way, no one's going to be able to do it for you. So part of having good teamwork is actually being able to effectively ask for what you need and also understand what your teammates need from you.
Right. I like that. I like that. That actually like leads on to my next question. I want to add, you've expanded on communication and getting your ideas across and all that, but like what kind of other skills are important when working in a team? Like for example, in the case where the person on the other end isn't as receptive as you would want it to be and understand your kind of communication, and like whenever you're confronted with like problem solving tasks, and your like your decision making might be confronted, and you want to get your idea across and you face that kind of resistance, what kind of approaches might you take when there's a little bit of pushback, or there's some stuff that aren't getting across clearly?
Okay. So first thing is kind of just take a breath, sit down, make sure you're not angry when you go to talk to another person.
Hmm.
Being calm just makes it a lot easier and gives you an upper hand. And then the other thing is actually sit down first with yourself and see what do I really need and what am I asking them for? And then think like when I asked them about this, did I actually ask for what I need or did I ask for something different? And then think, is it actually reasonable for me to ask this of them? Does it fall in their job description? Even if it does fall in their job description, can this person actually complete this? Because if you're asking someone to do something they can't do, they're going to get a little defensive or they're just not going to do it. And instead of admitting they can't do it, they're just going to say, like, ignore it. So you want to figure out, like, okay, is this actually reasonable what I'm asking? Can they actually do it? Now, if they can and they didn't do it, you have to think, well, why didn't they do this? Is there a reason? Did they not understand what I was asking for? Did they forget? Were they busy? What can I do to support them to make sure this gets done if we both need this done? Now, the thing is sometimes, you just asked about it really weird. And then you have to find out how you need to ask people. Like some people need to be incentivized when you ask them. And you need to be like, hey, like, and they just want to hear nice things. You want to be like, I really am going to appreciate if you do this. And like, we really need this and this will be helpful. And the company will really appreciate it. And some people are very receptive to that. Some people, when you say that, feel like it's not actually their job and they're doing you a favor. And you have to be a little bit more like with the stick and be like, actually, this is kind of part of your job description. This needs to get done. Like, this is actually, you know, a thing. And if it's that they don't understand what they do, be like, hey, you know what? Maybe help them with it. Sometimes maybe it's not what you want, or you find someone who does know it and you go, hey, can you guys do this together? And that way you both know how to do it and you figure out what's this. Or if you want to help them with it, be like, oh, actually, I know a little trick to make this go faster. So then you also don't make them feel like they don't know how and you're just telling them that they don't know and you're showing them how to do it. You can be like, oh, like, when I used to do this, I used to do these little tricks to make it go faster. So then you can help them and you can kind of see why they're going slower, why they're going faster at it. And then you also can like help teach them, because more often than not, when you really need to communicate or have these tasks, they're repeat things that are going to happen. So you really want to make sure everyone on the team knows how to do it. So just that simple task makes your life a lot easier down the line to make sure everyone understands what's needed of them. And then it's easier to ask of it the next time. And then also don't ask things too quickly, because you can overwhelm people. So sometimes the really good part of communication is like ask the important stuff first and work your way down, because you don't want them to like forget or get overwhelmed, because sometimes that can also happen in business. If you send someone a list of like 30 things, the importance gets diluted. So you kind of want to start with like the big important things and work your way down.
That was an amazing answer, actually. Super
Yeah.
insightful. You expanded on a lot of stuff. I wish we had done this interview earlier. I would have used a few of the things you said with my team currently. Uh, I love it. Okay, so my next question would be, what do you wish you knew earlier in your career about teamwork and communication? It seems like from what you just said right now, mostly all of it like seems to be attached to a certain experience you've had along the years where it was like a learning process from you.
Yes.
Like
So
maybe you can expand a little bit on that. Like what's something you wish you knew earlier?
um other thing I would say is don't always get so caught up in roles. Sometimes you're like, oh, this is the person's role or something, and then actually sit there and try to get to know the person, because some people have skills that you didn't even realize they have. And
Mm,
sometimes you just need to be flexible and you need to shuffle, because if someone is really good at something, you want them to do what they're best at. And if someone is bad at something, you want to find out what they're good at and have them do what they're good at. You don't want to try to force someone to do something they're bad at. Now, there is something to be said about making sure everyone learns what there's like all the different facets. Even if they're bad at it, you want them to have a few times doing it. But at the end of the day, in business and life, you kind of just want whoever is the most efficient at doing something, whoever is the best at doing something, put someone in their skills, because sometimes just reshuffling a little bit of things can make the experience go a lot more smoother. You'll find someone doing something that they're better at. Usually, when they're better, they tend to enjoy it a little bit more, because people enjoy it when they succeed.
mhm.
That being said, you can't always rely on that, because at some point you do want everyone to learn the different skills, just because you don't know when that person who's really good at it might move on, might get a promote, things change. So you do want other people who know how to do it. But in general, there is something to be said by like letting people stick with their skill and letting them grow in that. Because at the end of the day, that does really help your business, is like someone who specializes a little bit or can enjoy something a little bit more.
Okay, that was very, very, very thorough. I love it. Okay. Um, Based on that, like it's something I want to expand on, and it's something I actually covered a lot with my teams throughout the semester. I want to ask you, how important is trust in your work, and are you able to expand a little bit more and give an example about it, if there's anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, trust is very important for like various reasons. So for at least my business, we do deal with a lot of cash,
Hmm.
which you don't deal with a lot anymore. So there is trust that you want to know that no one is stealing from you, and you want to make sure all the cash is accounted for, and you want to have people that you can trust to be there. But even besides the fact of like stealing or anything like that, is we also work at we have a lot of different locations. So we do convenience stores and gas stations right now. And then some of those locations, they are 24-hour locations, and you want to have a lot of trust among your people that the person who's hired next is going to come in. Because the thing is someone can't just shut down a store and walk out. Or they need trust to know that like their person's actually going to show up on time who's coming next. Because if you have someone who got there at 9 a.m. and now it's 10 p.m. and no one's shown up, they're going to freak out because they don't know what to do. They can't spend 12, 20 hours in just a location sitting there. They need to know, like, they need to trust that their fellow employee is going to come and relieve them. So even something as simple as like being on time or fulfilling your responsibilities is very important because it makes it a better place to work for. It's going to come to a point where someone's like, I don't want to work this time because the person after me never shows up and like I can't do it. They're like, I don't want to work on that. And we've had situation where that's happened where like we've had people who are very amazing employees when they show up. And to get them to show up is a different story. And we make jokes where like we're like, okay, if he said he's at the light, he's still at his house. If he said he's at his house, he probably slept somewhere not at home. And he still has a million things to do before he gets here. And like no one wants that kind of reputation because we're sitting there and we're like, we can't rely on this person and we can't rely at a hiring because that's not fair to our other employees. And you've got to ask yourself, like, okay, what do I do if he's consistently 2 hours late? And you also don't want to plan for someone who's always going to do that. So there's a trust in the sense that, like, are you going to show up when you said you did? And that also causes animosity between employees. And then there's also a trust of like, are you going to do what you need to when you get down here? Like when you work, like, are you going to do your fair share? Or are you going to be someone who just sits and like, everyone has a freeloader at one point or another, and you have to learn to interact with them. You either need to learn how to get them to do their share of work, or at some point that freeloader probably isn't going to be working very long.
You expanded on, you mentioned a couple of points that I would like to ask a little bit more upon. Like in that case, when someone shows like does consistently showing bad habits, like what kind of measures might you take in order like to impose kind of a little bit of discipline, or like at what point do you feel like the issue needs to be addressed, and in what way?
So it depends on the issue. So when it's bad habits when they're late, you kind of tell them this is going to affect you. You give a few chances because, people are human, you don't know what's going on, but you see what's reasonable. For each business, there's a different level of reasonability for the stress test, I guess, thing. So, like, you don't want show, like, if you're in a situation where, you know what, it's not a set shift, they're not relieving someone, and it's like they have certain projects that have to get done, and as long as they get their project done by a deadline, maybe you're going to be a little bit more flexible with someone who comes in late if they stay late, because at the end of the day they're getting their work done. So it kind of depends on what their role is. Now if it's someone where them being late affects another teammate or another employee, that becomes a different thing because you need to balance the need of your other employees. You can't, regardless of how good the work is, if they are being hurting your other employees, you also have to be able to sit there and be like, no, that's not okay, because now you're hurting someone else and there's going to be a lower threshold of tolerance. Now the other thing is, one thing where I did have to deal with was theft, where someone was maybe stealing a little bit. Now I have a zero tolerance policy for theft, but you also have to be smart in the sense that unfortunately, sometimes you're not always in a position to fire someone on the spot. So when I had a situation where someone was stealing, and I think the thing is they didn't consider it stealing because they had the intention of paying it back. But they were playing lottery, and I think they were a little addicted, and they were always had this intention of paying it back. But the thing is like they'd overplay, and then it'd be like a day or two, and then the money would come back later, and they were kind of playing it around with it. Now, I don't like this. This is a bigger habit, thing. But the problem is at the time they were helping at a relatively new location that didn't really have any employees. And I would not be able to run this station if he was not there.
Mm,
Or it would have really put too much of a burden on the other employees, and it wouldn't be fair to them. So at that point, I couldn't really let it known that I knew there was an issue and this was happening, because if they know you know it's an issue and you're letting it slide, they're going to let it get bigger. But I did keep track of everything and what came in and out. And then when I was in a position after like 3-4 weeks, when I
wow.
could
Okay.
like fire him because I had found someone else to cover and all of this stuff, I made subtle comments like, "Oh, I noticed something's a little off." And
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna have to go through and do a deep dive into all the money. I'm probably gonna do it starting tomorrow and the rest of this week to figure out what happened. All of a sudden, all of the money reappeared. He's afraid of being caught. I went through, I did my deep dive, told them, hey, everything's fine. But then I told the other employee, by the way, we do not need you anymore. Please, like, don't worry about it.
I like how
Because
you
the
played
thing
the
is,
long game with it. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
you have to, because at a certain point is, as much as he's taking, it was going to be hurt me more to shut the station for 3 weeks.
Hmm.
But I did keep track of it. I did have proof of it. So if later on I had to do something, I'd be able to. And also, I knew this person well enough as a person to know that they didn't really want to steal and they had the intention of returning all the money. So I wanted to make sure the money was returned before I reacted, because you have to also figure out how are you going to do this to make sure like you get the most beneficial outcome for your company, because it doesn't help me if then I just fired him on the spot and the money never came back. And it doesn't help me if I confronted him very early on, but I had no way to give him an actual consequence. So either he becomes too comfortable and takes more. Like, you really do sometimes, unfortunately, have to suck it up and like take a little bit of a hit before you can do the thing. Or even sometimes with like a bad employee, like I remember I was reading a story about someone who just got really mad and just fired all of her incompetent employees at once, and then they had no one to do anything. And it's like, you can't run a business by yourself. You can't work by yourself. Even now in school, you have group projects. You can't do the whole group project by yourself.
I'm
So
learning that the hard way.
sometimes, yeah, you have people who slack a little bit and you want to blow up, you want to get mad, but you can't, because if you can't communicate with them,
Mhm,
getting something is better than getting nothing.
mhm.
Even
No,
if it's not to your full standard, sometimes you just have to learn how to deal with it and what the best strategy is. And you can't deal with it forever, obviously, but like sometimes you have to take the hit for these short term things.
I like how you were aware of the time frame and you gave it like it looks like you put in a strategy for it and you didn't want to just be like a just given an instant reaction to it, you know, and you clearly put in thought about how it is going to affect your team around you,
Yeah.
which is something of high value. But like on the other end of that, like how do you build the trust? I mean, you already the follow up the question and how do you recover if it gets lost? But I wanted to ask, like, how do you build the trust? Like, how do you get to a point where, like, you just said, like, for example, with that person, that even though they took the money, you knew them enough to know that they're not gonna just take it. They have the intention of giving it back, but it's just like the ethics of it is what broke the trust. But how do you build that trust?
I think part of it is it depends on how long you've known the person. Um, in this particular situation, like we had known them for a few years,
Hmm.
outside of a working capacity as well. But the thing is, this is also kind of why it's important just to get to know the people around you, to get to know, your teammates and all of this stuff, because that kind of tells you what kind of person they are. as well. Like you can see their quality of work, but really when you ask them questions and talk to them and get to know about their life, you do build up a relationship with people and you do have certain trusts. And then you do find that like if you can open up and be good with them and let them know about you and you care, like you actually do need to care to get to know about your teammates and the people around you. You will find out a lot about them, what kind of person they are. And then also you will find that they're less likely to want to hurt you if they care about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like
Definitely.
if someone's like a nice guy and a good person to work with, you're like, oh, I don't want to be late to relieve this person. Like he's like one of my friends. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna hate me if I'm 2 hours late and I screwed him over. Versus if you're like, oh, that guy's a dick. Like
Language.
he kind of deserves it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You do want to always sometimes like it's also good. One of the good things with trust is one, you want to be a good teammate in the sense that you want to do your work, you want to do what's expected of you because you're not perfect either. You're going to make mistakes. People are going to, your teammates are eventually at some point might need to help you out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to know you're going to help them, but you also want to get to know them as a person because you're like, hey, this is a person worth helping. This is a person who, like, I know if I can trust or not.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. I like that you expanded on the part of caring and actually getting to know the person. I feel like that's something that gets lost sometimes. Not a lot of people expand on that. Uh, and now I'm gonna go on to my last question. It is, what is one habit you would recommend that a new master's an international business graduate student develops about teamwork and communication? This is a question to answer. It relates to me as I am in that position currently.
Um, I would say as you get further on into companies or you talk to different people, I would say each company is different. But if you ever go somewhere, look at who is the most. There's two things you want to look at: who's the most well liked person there,
Mm-hmm.
and also who is the person who gets the most shit done, and see what they do. Because sometimes there's not a one fit all strategy for every place. And also, as you're going to be in your program, you're going to realize there's a big emphasis on company culture and organizational behaviors. And each company kind of has like a thing that makes them tick, the thing that makes them work. Like, you don't realize how big company culture is until you realize that $1 million acquisitions will like fail and mergers because what happened is the two companies that were coming together completely clashed and didn't know how to work together. So just as important as the business model is the actual culture of the company is melding. So what happens is when you go to a new company, you look at like who is the most successful person there and then also who is the most well-liked person there.
Mm.
What you'll see is what they do is probably what's going to help lead to success in that particular company, and you want to see which one of those skills you can emanate, like you could imitate and see what is like, hey, I can do that, or this is reasonable, or I think this will help me succeed. And then the other thing is there is no one set way, there is no perfect. The best thing is to be flexible and like you're in a program, look at the people around you, there's so many different people you can learn from. Like it's always great to observe other people to see who you can learn from. Even the least person that you expect might give you the greatest insight. Sometimes you have an intern that everyone relies on and everyone will talk to, and you're like, this is weird. Why is like the owner really loves this intern? You want to see that because that is in the future. These are connections. This is communication. This is all that different stuff.
I love it. I mean, that's some great advice. I feel like you kind of have like that kind of beginner's mindset that a lot of people try to preach of like learning from everyone, whether it be it intentionally or unintentionally, if they're trying to teach that. Mirna, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. You gave some really insightful answers and you covered a lot of stuff. I can't wait to like I'm gonna have to write a research paper about this later on. So I really appreciate it. I'm about to stop the recording now. All right. Oh no, stop the video.
Okay.